continued impact of the 21-22 MTF budget cuts, which rendered a number of the filled and vacant posts unfunded. What we also noted with this department, though, is that they have filled posts in year despite that budget pressure. So they filled a number of educator and educator specialist posts. These have been noted to increase from 88,102 posts filled in June to 88,753 posts at the end of September. So that means that the department filled educator posts in respect of substitutes and temporary educators despite the budget shortfall. The concern with this, of course, is that the budget pressures will continue to increase if the headcount is not managed down in line with available funds. The department is receiving additional funds for the 2023 wage agreement of around 2.3 billion rand. Again, as I said, this was received after the September IYM, so it's not in the table. But even if we take that into account, there is still a significant budget pressure of 1.149 billion that remains, that the department will have to carefully manage to stay within budget by year end. The impact of these budget pressures means that the department sometimes has had to hold back on payments as there was insufficient cash for them to effect all the payments for both salaries and service providers. To date, all salary runs have gone through, but there have been occasions when certain service providers haven't received their payments because of unavailability of funds in their bank account. The department is trying to manage this pressure also through implementing enforced savings and more stringent cost-cutting measures internally. They will have to continue to do so until year end. Public Works shows projected overspending of 566.496 million. The largest part of that relates to the municipal property rates pressures, which they've calculated at 531.4 million rand. They are going to receive additional funding for this in the adjustments. As at the September IYM, they've been notified that they're receiving 400 million. This could increase in the adjustments, and we'll take you through that when we finalize the adjustments process. But for now, 400 million they had been advised of as at September. So that reduces that pressure a little bit. On the other hand, they also had budget pressures under goods and services, where they're projecting to be overspent by 25 million by year end. This is largely due to higher than anticipated costs of them appointing consultants to implement the infrastructure program management unit, which they didn't adequately budget for. So it's quite a big amount. And they definitely should indicate why they would have continued with the project if they didn't have the funds for it. Buildings and other fixed structures, this is for the internal building program, so it's not where they construct things for other departments, it's for the own use buildings. They'd already spent 238.6% of the annual budget by mid-year, and the category does reflect projected overspending of 28.782 million at year end. Transport is also reflecting projected overspending of 205.6 million rand. There are two main items that are contributing to that. The one is the payment of Microsoft licenses from the previous year, 22-23, that were only paid in 23-24. It's a very large amount for Microsoft licenses, 183.5 million rand. In their adjustments inputs, we can already see that they are undertaking environments to try and cover that amount. So I think they will be able to manage that spending item. On the other hand, they are also showing projected pressures on their learner transport services, for which the department has requested additional funding, and that is the request for is currently being considered and will be looked at as part of the adjustments estimate process. Social development, they're projecting to be overspent by 192.3 million rand. Compensation of employees shows pressure, partly because of the carry-through of the 21-22 MTF budget cuts, which were affected by National Treasury at the time, and which obviously stay in the department's baseline. This resulted in approximately 523 filled and unfilled posts becoming unaffordable for the vote as a whole, and then further contributing to their pressures, the 2023 wage agreement, for which they don't receive additional funding, that was calculated to cost them 96.7 million rand. Also showing pressures, goods and services. There are a few reasons for that. as a result of continuous budget pressures against property payments relating to security services costs because of the annual tariff increases, which are inadequately budgeted for because of the budget cuts. Higher than budgeted maintenance costs for departmental motor vehicles due to the fact that some of the departmental motor vehicles have reached the set maximum kilometers and are now attracting high servicing costs. Also, the nature of services being provided by the department often requires officials to travel on gravel roads, and so there's a high need for the replacement of tyres. There's also been an increase in travel claims as more officials opted to use their private vehicles for business in light of the increase in the number of hijackings of the departmental vehicles. They also show pressures against buildings and other fixed structures. A lot of it is because of accruals carried over from 22-23 only being paid in the current year. The legislature is also showing projected overspending, 94.133 million. So under this vote, both programs are showing budget pressures, and so is the statutory members' remuneration. Also, we can see the pressure against most economic categories. For the members' remuneration, the projected year-end overspending is 5.367 million rand. This needs to be funded as a direct charge on the Provincial Revenue Fund. So that will have to be considered for additional funding in the adjustments. And then on the operational budget, they are showing projected overspending of 88.766 million. The budget pressures on the operational budget, so against the 88.7 million, is largely due to the payment of some outstanding commitments from 22-23, also the implementation of the 2023 wage agreement. They also had costs related to members' empowerment programs or overseas study tours, which were under budgeted for. There have been voter education activities paid for by Midyear, as well as higher than projected spending on legislature activities such as sectoral parliaments. As I said, the budget pressures against the members' remuneration will have to be covered, and that arose from a 3% increase in all members' salaries. This was gazetted for 23-24, but what was a little bit unusual is that it was backdated to 1 April 2022, so not this April, the one before. So we're looking at a cost for more than one financial year that needs to be carried in this current financial year. Also, gratuity payments had to be made when members have resigned. The operational budget currently excludes the money that will be allocated back to the legislature, being their operational underspending in the prior year and their revenue over collection. Also, our MEC made an undertaking in the main budget speech in March that 15 million would be allocated to the legislature for voter education. And if we include those, then the operational budget pressure reduces from 88.7 million to 44 million rand. So there is still some pressure in the legislature, and this will have to be carefully managed by them. Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, they're projecting to be overspent by 70.990 million rand. It's entirely due to the 2023 wage agreement. They are busy doing the necessary environments for this and will formalize that in the adjustments estimate process to offset this pressure. Office of the Premier also projecting to be overspent by 59.4 million rand. This pressure relates partly to requested rollovers from 22-23. In total, that asked for 9.4 million rand in rollovers. Part of it was related to the African Union donor funding received for the April 2022 floods. That amount is likely, will be rolled over because it's donor funding. We have to make sure it's still available for the same purpose. But the rollover with respect to the bursaries for the aviation program and staff exit costs are unlikely to be approved for rollover, and so the department's already started undertaking environments to cover that cost. The department, part of their pressure also relates to the 30 million rand they had suspended from the previous year, from 2022, for reallocation in the current year for the broadband connectivity project. That 30 million hadn't been included in the September IYM, but it will be included in the October IYM. So that reduces their pressure quite a bit. The department's projected overspending also includes 20 million regarding legal fees for court cases related to His Majesty the King, and they have requested additional funding for this to be transferred to the Zulu Royal House, and that's being considered as part of the adjustments estimate. We do feel that their projected overspending may be a little bit overstated because we can see relatively low spending against compensation of employees at mid-year. They've spent 45.9% of their annual budget, and that's despite including the payments for the 2023 wage agreement. So we do anticipate some underspending there, which I think they can use to offset some of the spending pressures that might not be addressed by additional funding. Human settlements, they show a projected overspending of 40.799 million. It's mainly against the equitable share, which is a very small portion of their budget. Their budget, as members know, is largely conditional grant funded. On the equitable share, they are expecting pressures largely because of the 2023 wage agreement and also the carry-through effects of the 21-22 MTF budget cuts. They had asked for some money they've collected this year to be allocated back to them. It's only 7.564 million. That's being considered as part of the adjustments process. So that will help reduce the 40 million, but they'll also have to make a few decisions to reduce their spending by year end. COCTA shows projected overspending of 35.1 million. This is mainly due to the increase of traditional council secretaries' stipends. They had increased the stipends from 1,600 Rand to 8,000 Rand per month from the 1st of April. But what's causing the pressure for them is that the budget had provided for increasing the stipend from 1,600 to 6,000 Rand in year. And then a decision was taken to increase that to 8,000 Rand. So that pressure that causes a pressure of around 27 million Rand because they've got 294 traditional council secretaries. Also contributing to the projected overspending are the salary increases for Amakosi and Izinduna that was implemented this year. It's a 3% increase that they received. And the departments indicated they will undertake reprioritization to fund these budget pressures and the adjustments estimate. The next table is quite busy. It's the conditional grant table. We split it over 2 slides just to make it a bit easier to read. It's only one grant currently that's showing projected overspending. It's the 63.291 million here against the Early Childhood Development Grant under Vote 5 Education. Quite a bit of the focus of this presentation will be on those grants who are actually showing very low spending by mid-year. So we've highlighted them with a shaded or a dotty box in the right-hand column that says percentage spent. So anything below 40% spent we felt was quite low if you compare to the 50% straight line benchmark. In aggregate, by mid-year, departments had spent 12.112 billion of the adjusted budget of 26.857 billion. So in aggregate, we've spent around 45.1%. Some grants are doing well, but the ones who are showing low spending, we explain in the next few slides. So we'll start with the ECD grant, which is showing projected overspending. They've already spent 62.9% against the annual budget. Education has indicated that the allocation is provided towards increasing the number of eligible children accessing subsidies and ECD services. The higher than projected spending at mid-year was mainly against the ECD maintenance for infrastructure due to payments for 2 projects because those happened faster than anticipated. There's faster progress, and so there've been higher payments budgeted for, just happened a bit earlier in the financial year. But the projected overspending, as the department has indicated, is really from the fact that the conditional grant funding was one of the grants that was cut when the main budget for 23-24 was prepared by National Treasury. And we have asked them, considering that the baseline is lower now, that they must find ways to stay within this lower baseline. So that's one of the areas they need to consider. The Lima Letsema projects grant under agriculture, It's quite low. They've spent 19.7% of their budget by mid-year. It isn't an unusual trend, though, for this grant. It has shown a good history over the last 2 years or so of being fully spent by year end. And it's often the spending is often quite low by mid-year, and that's just because of the nature of the projects that this grant pays for example, irrigation schemes, mechanization services, and these are often only performed in the latter part of 23-24. So we do expect that to improve, and it is likely in our view that the spending for this grant will pick up in the second half of the year, as has been the case previously. The Health Facility Revitalisation Grant under the Department of Health, their spending's been quite low, 34.5%. They say that this was affected by cash blocking. So in the months where they didn't have sufficient cash, they were unable to effect all the payments against the infrastructure projects. And that has sometimes led to contractors suspending work on projects as a result of non-payment. Also, the introduction of the LOGIS system is causing delays in issuing orders to suppliers. They are projecting to be fully spent by year end. The Human Settlements Development Grant, also quite low, 37% of the annual budget. It's partly related to the 2019 flood disaster projects that encountered various delays. Members will recall when we presented the closeout report to you, the 2019 flood disaster projects were negatively impacted by the 2022 floods, because work that had started on the 29 flood disaster projects was then in many cases washed away when the 2022 floods came. So it's really, for quite a few of the projects, it was starting nearly from scratch again, and so that's caused some problems for the departments. They do indicate that contractors are currently busy with pre-construction activities, beneficiary administration, geotechnical studies, project and home enrollment, and so forth. There are also other projects which were delayed. We list them here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but there are different reasons. For example, on some sites, when they start construction, they discover there's hard rock, and that just makes progress a little bit slower because that rock has to be removed or worked around, at least in some cases. Also, some projects were affected by unavailability of bulk infrastructure, and there are a number of reasons cited there. The Informal Settlements Upgrading Partnership Grant by mid-year was also quite low, 21.2% of the annual budget spent. There have been delays in a number of housing projects. We give reasons and names of houses in this, or housing projects in this slide. I won't go through all of them, but we do feel that the projected full spending against this grant appears optimistic, considering the challenges that are cited against those various housing projects. The Community Library Services Grant, also quite low, 25.1% of the annual budget spent by mid-year. The department indicated that the procurement of library books was not finalized, and this was impacted because the procurement process was halted due to a complaint submitted by one of the bidders with respect to the dismissal of their application. This complaint was submitted after the appeal period had lapsed. The case is currently with the State Attorney, and the department's Legal Services Unit advised that the procurement should be halted pending the outcome of the case. There were also delays in the construction of libraries as a result of disputes concerning land ownership between the province and various municipalities, as well as termination of contracts for the construction of libraries due to non-performance of the contractors. The Department of Sport, Arts and Culture is projecting to fully spend against this grant. Seems unlikely at this point, just considering the two reasons provided for the slow spending by mid-year. So we'll have to keep an eye on that conditional grant. On the infrastructure side, departments in aggregate spent 9.257 billion by mid-year against a budget of 20.015 billion. And we are seeing a projected underspending of 444.785 million rand by year end. The most significant projected underspending is shown by two departments. It's education and transport. So education is reflecting a projected underspending of 91 million rand against the infrastructure budget. They have put into effect enforced savings against their maintenance and repairs current allocation, and that's so that they can move funds to assist in the compensation of employees' pressures within the department. They were also effecting savings or realizing savings on funding set aside for repairs and maintenance of various administrative buildings. So that's what the maintenance and repair savings is about. There are also enforced savings against upgrades and additions capital to offset spending pressures against compensation. Transport, they reflect projected underspending of 388.781 million, mainly against new infrastructure assets, which is projecting to be underspent by 289.4 million. This relates to projects that were planned but could not take place due to procurement challenges. And they've indicated they'll move that money around within spending pressures in capital. They're also projecting to be underspent against upgrades and additions capital by 106 million rand. That's because of contractual delays, contracts terminated due to poor performance, work stoppages by the communities because of access to quarries, and projects which were delayed due to slow progress by contractors on site. So a number, as I indicated, each vote has a number of matters for discussion that's listed at the end of each chapter in the book that we prepared. We've picked out a few that we thought would be of interest to members of this committee. And I'll just take you through those few here. It's not all that many, but they are quite significant. The first one is the Office of the Premier's Broadband Connectivity Project. As we indicated, 30 million will be allocated to the department for this. In the adjustments estimate, it is money that they suspended from the budget last year for allocation in the current year. The project includes district activations such as broadband connectivity, digital hubs, digital skilling, including data science training, artificial intelligence, and robotics. By mid-year, spending was quite low against this project at 3.675 million. Also, under Office of the Premier, the KZN Youth Empowerment Fund, the department has indicated to us that they are changing their approach in rolling out this Youth Empowerment Fund. In the past, they used to transfer funds to the KZN Growth Fund Trust, and they've now looked at it. They want to do it slightly differently, and they're going to move the 100 million in the adjustments from being transferred to the KZN Growth Fund Trust to transfers and subsidies to public corporations and private enterprises. They have decided to amend their approach and will rather partner with the private sector in rolling out this youth program. So in April 2023, advertisements were placed targeting youth interested in owning a Dunlop business in the box concept as part of a partnership entered into with Dunlop, and that will take up about 20 million of the 100 million. They've been assessing applications, and the transfer payments for the 20 million will begin in the third quarter. They're planning to roll out 24 sites for which 200 applications were received, and the assessment process is underway. The department intends to identify further projects that have the potential of creating mass jobs in different sectors. There are a few other private sector organizations, I never know how to pronounce it, Huawei, I think, and Fuse Aviation. And these will be funded by the balance of the 80 million. So it's just to note the change in approach in terms of the KZN Youth Empowerment Fund. This one I've already touched on is the absorption of COVID-19 staff by the Department of Health. As I said, this is adding to their projected overspending against compensation of employees. So as much as part of their pressures, the compensation of the 2023 wage agreement, for which they're getting some additional funding, some of their problems relate to the fact that they have taken on COVID-19 staff when they didn't have adequate budget to do so. So we did an analysis at 6,104 COVID-19 staff that were absorbed into permanent positions since the end of the pandemic in 2022 at an annual cost of 1.842 billion. And these are not budgeted for. Under Community Safety and Liaison, members will recall that this department received an additional allocation in the main budget of 11.550 million rand, and that was to provide security for the Amakosi. We've noted quite low spending against this by mid-year. So where their projections showed that they had intended to spend by around 5.7 million of that amount by mid-year, they have spent 650,000 rand only so far. According to the department, there was a delay in appointing security for Amakosi because of delays in the appointment of consultants to undertake a verification of Amakosi who require the security services. And these consultants have since been appointed in August. So 650,000 spent to date was on the provision of security for 2 Amakosi who were verified thus far. The next one is on the Izinduna back pay. It's really just to give members some comfort that that money is being spent quite well by the department. You will recall that they received that 631 million long awaited by the province. National Treasury allocated it to the province in 23-24 in the main budget for us to settle the back pay that was due to the Izinduna since the inception of their payments. So as I said, the department's doing well. 3,004 Izinduna qualified to be paid the back pay, and as at 24 October, the department had paid a total of 2,630 of these, so that's 88%, and they've spent 558.5 million rand on that. The remaining 374 Izinduna will be paid the balance of the 72.5 million following the finalization of legal departmental processes of tracing beneficiaries, and also in some instances it involves deceased estates. So whether Izinduna have passed away, these payments are still due to their estates, but then as we all know, that can take quite a long time before that can be finalized. So that's what the department is working with, but they have spent quite well up until now. The other item that we keep seeing coming up in reports with COPTA is the intention to hold traditional council elections. Again, this year there is such an intention. They indicated that they were going to hold them this year, but have now already indicated that they will likely be held in 24-25. The department has indicated that currently Amakosi are not in favor of the elections, and so they haven't been able to set a final date. They budgeted 8 million rand for these elections in the current year, but we noted that they've been continuously postponed from 2018. COPTA, we continue engaging with them just to make sure that they don't keep allocating funds to municipalities unless they ensure that those funds previously transferred have been spent. So that's just an ongoing focus area for us. Transport, we've noted significant procurement challenges. You can see it on the spending. If you drive around in our province, you can see it on the roads. The department showed slower than anticipated spending by mid-year against their maintenance and capital projects because the department has not finalized the 2 major contracts that were declared irregular by the Auditor General in the 2019-20 audit process. So that continues to be a problem. The unresolved challenges with maintenance and construction projects is, of course, a concern. The department was requested to provide an update with regard to replacement of the 2 major contracts that were declared irregular, and also needs to provide timelines for when the maintenance and capital project contracts will be finalized. Linked to this is that the SEM capacity challenges in the department continue to be a concern and need to be addressed urgently because they are affecting service delivery. For transport, we also noted that they transferred 726 million rand in May to SANRAL for 20 projects related to the April 2022 flood disaster. I've included the table there. It's a bit small. We can always try and give it to members in a bigger format than that. What we basically wanted to hear from the department is, of the money transferred to SANRAL, how much of it has been spent, what progress has been made, but the department hadn't provided that information by the time the mid-year report went to print. Social development, the one area that we feel needs focus there is on the EPW grant allocations. We feel that that's declining, and yet the number of community drivers that they point is not changing. So we've noted that the grant budget reduces year on year, and it was at 48 million in 2021, down to only 28.8 million in 23-24, but they've kept the number of CCGs the same. So obviously that's also causing some pressure on their budget. We have asked, because we were also concerned as to why the grant allocation would reduce so significantly. So Treasury, our Provincial Treasury, engaged with National Treasury and the National Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, who are responsible for the EPWP program, on what the root causes are for this grant reduction. And they indicated to us that the grant allocations were reduced due to the reduction in full-time equivalents reported by the department in the previous 18 months, as well as due to penalties relating to the late submission of planning documents and non-submission of non-financial reports for the third quarter of 22-23. So in effect, they were saying the department hadn't submitted what they needed to by the deadline. We then spoke to the department about that, and they said no, they felt that they had given all the information that they needed to the national department. And so we've asked them to just provide an update in this regard, so that we can just make sure that we report adequately, so that our numbers can go up again in terms of the budget allocation. As I've already said, Public Works, we concerned about the Provincial Infrastructure Program Management Unit, the fact that the department has gone ahead with this despite not adequately budgeting for it, and it's causing, as I said earlier on, a budget pressure against their goods and services budget. The crime fighting initiative, I think this one will also interest me. It was announced by the Honourable Premier in her State of the Province address in 2023 that departments and entities would contribute towards the crime fighting initiative. And there was some uncertainty around this in the first few months of the year, just in terms of how much should be taken from each department and each entity. But this became a lot clearer then when the Department of Community Safety and Liaison developed a business plan on the implementation thereof. That was adopted by the Executive Council, and Treasury then used this approved business plan to determine the amount of funding to be suspended from the various votes for allocation to vote 9. So we'll give you the detail on exactly how much is being surrendered by each vote and each entity in the adjustments estimate presentation. But safe to say that right now funds are available for the crime fighting initiative. And so we expect spending to pick up on that in the second half of the year. Finally, this slide is just included to show the provincial cash position. Despite the budget pressures, we do remain cash positive as a province. There have been challenges, as I said earlier on, for some departments in some months where the transfer they get from National Treasury in terms of the cash received is sometimes not adequate, and there's been cash blocking imposed in those months. But overall, our cash position is positive. Thank you, Chair. I will end there, and then Liesl can pick up on the public entity presentation.
Thank you to Tanya on the report that she has just given us. I think it was quite thorough. I'm sure we all noted where we have to engage, honourable members. I think we move to number 7 on our agenda, which is discussion.
There's one presentation.
Oh, there's one more presentation. Okay, I'm sorry. Then we can proceed to the second presentation. Then, please, honourable members, note your questions for both presentations. Thank you.
Sorry, can you see my presentation, Chair?
Not yet.
Let me just.
Going the wrong screen.
I think it's like a wrong screen coming up.
Okay. Let me just share again. Background there.
Yeah.
Are you able to see it now, Chair?
Yes, yes.
Good morning, Honourable Chair and members, HOD and colleagues. The public entity presentation is fortunately not as long, So I'll go through that quickly. What we were looking at would be the revenue, the expenditure, the infrastructure spending, a summary of rationalization progress, and then significant issues in general that we've picked up on the entities. So just here, I would like to draw your attention to the bottom corner on the right, and you'll see that the collection by mid-year is 54.9%, which is quite positive. It's above the 50% baseline or benchmark that we would expect for mid-year. The slow contributors there being Itala Development Finance Corporation. Let me just get my laser. There at 39%. And then we've get the growth fund there, and that's 37%. And we'll look at the reasons a little bit later. Next slide. If I look there, that just gives us the composition of the revenue collected by mid-year. And the first column here is the transfer for the department. Then we get the rollover and then own revenue. So if we just look at that, departmental transfer is still making up the biggest portion of the entity's income at about 43%. The rollovers are at least shrinking. Last year we had over 1 billion. This year it's a bit better at 774 million there at the bottom. And then own revenue at 1 billion. The fourth column that you see there is just VAT payments that the entities has to make. And that is offset to some extent by goods and services payments, but we see still that the province is paying over tax to SARS because of the transfer values. So the public entities collected 3.126 billion against the adjusted budget of 5.7 billion, and that represents 54.9% as we've seen. Of this revenue collection, the transfers received from parent departments by mid-year amounted to 1.35 billion. The rollovers was at 775 million, and then the own revenue amounted to 1 billion. The significant own revenue collectors is Mvelo at 127 million, largely relating to the accommodation and admission fees. And there are also projects there funded by DFFE and National Department of Tourism. Dubai Trade Port Corporation collected 109 million, and that's largely in respect of cargo handling fees and interest on positive cash balances in the bank account. Itala Development Finance Corporation collected 621 million, and that's largely ascribed to bad debt recoveries, fee income. Sorry, I need to move my little block here. Interest charge on loan disbursements and property rentals.
There's no sound.
Sorry, am I audible? Can
Yes.
you hear?
Oh, no.
Okay. Gaming and Betting Board collected 27 million, and that's mainly from licensing, registration, monitoring fees, as well as interest on positive cash balances in the bank account. The tax revenue that's collected by Gambling Board is reflected under ETIA, and that's not part of the 27 million that we're seeing here. The Growth Fund collected 47 million, and that's largely from interest earned on loans and cash balances. Sharksport collected 25 million, and that's meshing fees, which is the netting charge, and the hiring out of venues, and they also hire out an electronic billboard. Richards Bay IDZ collected 40.107 million, and that's largely from interest on the capital developments. Sorry. On the projected year-end revenue collection, we're looking there at an under collection projected of 66 million. And that's mainly Itala Development Finance Corporation that contributes to that. And you'll see smaller amounts there. We'll speak about the detail of that, of the finance corporation on the next few slides. But it's partly offset by Richards Bay IDZ, Mvelo and Dubai Trade Port that is then projecting to over collect against their revenue budgets. Sorry, my slide doesn't want to move. Projected year-end revenue collection. The public entities project to undercollect by 66 million and aggregate by year-end, mainly ascribed to the IDFC projects. And there they're looking at 99 million, and that's because I anticipated lower than budgeted interest income on cash balances and interest earned on loan disbursements. The entity also did something strange. In the beginning of the year, they anticipated rolling out extensive programs to look at their non-performing loans, and they increased the budget. So this is also partly then due or contributing to their projected undercollection is because their budget is now overstated. These programs that they rolled out didn't go as well as they anticipated. Moses Kotane Institute projects to undercollect by 1.5 million, and that's largely ascribed to VAT refunds, which were over budgeted for. In terms of the partially offsetting the undercollection is Ezemvelo, and they project to overcollect by 7 million, and that's ascribed to their tourism income and also game sales that was higher or that will be higher than anticipated. Dubai Tradeport project to overcollect by 8 million, and that's due to cargo revenue that was being higher than budgeted for. Tourism KZN projects to overcollect by 1.4 million, and that's largely ascribed to interest income earned on positive bank balances. Richards Bay IDZ projects a year-end overcollection of 16 million, and that's largely ascribed to higher than budgeted income from interest earned due to an increase in the interest rate, significant cash bank balance in the bank account, and then funds received from the DTIC for capital developments. If we look at expenditure by mid-year, that's where we start to get a bit concerned. At 40.9%, it's not brilliant for the mid-year benchmark. The slow spenders there being Itala Development Finance Corporation, if you can look there, Dubai Tradeport on the capital development, as well as Richards Bay IDZ, also being capital developments. So those are the concerns that we have. Liquor Authority also looks low at this point, but we'll see when I explain later. It's because most of the activities or many of the activities are aligned to the licensing cycle, which started in October. If we look at the composition of expenses by public entity, there, if we look at the columns being compensation of employees, goods and services, transfer subsidies, capital assets, and other, you'll see there, if you look at the bottom here, the percentage of total expenditure, compensation of employees still make up quite a bit. Goods and services, 41.9%, and then capital assets, which is both buildings and fixed structures, as well as machinery and equipment, only being 10.7% of the total budgets. Also, what we can see here are our labor-intensive entities. If we look at the relative to the size of the budget, being Ezemvelo at 380 compared to a budget here of 560, that's quite high. Even gaming and betting and liquor, because of the types of work that they do with inspectorates, also quite high relative to the total budget. And Sharks Board also with their boat cruise, that's also quite high relative to the total budget. And even Moses Kotane is more than 50% of the total budget. At mid-year, the entity spent an aggregate of 40.9% of the total adjusted budget of 5.9 billion, which is low. Of mid-year expenses, as I said, compensation comprised 40.4 and goods and services 41.9. Follow entities showed slow spending by mid-year. ADA spent 45.9%. The low rate of spending there was mainly because of vacant posts, outstanding invoices for contracted service, and then capacity building workshops were planned for the second half of the year. Some projects also commenced late because the funding was only received from DARD at the end of July, after which the entity then only started due to the procurement process. Ezemvelo spent 47.9% of the adjusted budget of 1.1 billion, and the slow spending there is mainly due to vacant posts, and that also includes the seasonal posts for commercial services. What happens at year end when they have lots of bookings, they hire temporary employees or seasonal employees to assist with the tourism activities, and that has not yet happened. The road maintenance projects at Midyear reserves experienced some delays in the first half of the year. Similarly, the demolition of the abattoir as part of the Temyandumo project is awaiting NDT approval, and the Siaya Coastal Development Project requires additional funding or change in the scope of the project, and the decision is waiting from ETIA in that regard. Furthermore, Bushingata Lodge Upgrade Project can only proceed once town planning processes are completed, and the entity is currently terminating the contract with the main contractor responsible for the NDT roofing project due to poor performance. Other entities that showed slow spending, Dubai Trade Port, only 26% of the adjusted budget, and that low rate of spending was due to vacant posts. And then the procurement for plant, machinery, and equipment is still in progress. There were outstanding invoices for service providers. The annual renewals for software licenses and projects, such as the construction of the medium-sized factories and the road rehabilitation, are only scheduled to happen in the second half of the year. The IDFC spent 38% of the adjusted budget, and that's also largely ascribed to vacancies. And there's also outstanding invoices for security and cleaning services and marketing subscription and IT cost. However, the biggest aspect here that contributes to the slow spending is the recapitalization of the SOC limited branches, and that what the entire budget has been put into 1 year, but these projects will only happen across multiple years, and that contributes to the low spending. KZN GBB spent 39.9%, and the low rate there is because of vacant positions. And then Liquor Authority spent 43.8%, and that's also because of vacant positions. Some contracted services at the board secretariat will only be due in the fourth quarters. But then, as I alluded to, the awareness campaigns and compliance inspections and licensing activities will only be scheduled in the second half of the year to coincide with the license renewal period and then also the festive season. Tourism spent 48%, and the low rate of spending there was largely due to vacant posts and projects. The projects there are capital in nature, such as the NDT-funded Nelson Mandela capture site and the KwaZulu Caves Precinct upgrade project, in terms of which tender processes were delayed, and no spending was incurred in respect of Nzikeni May Lodge upgrade project, pending the establishment of a community trust to get the buy-in and the agreement of the project deliverables. The intention here is to hand over the project to the community, so they needed to have the community's input for this project. Shark Sports spent 42.7%, and that was mainly because of delayed progress on the research project to develop a shark repellent cable. And then they waited for Treasury approval for the rollover of funds that were rolled over from prior years. Richards Bay spent 39.6% of the adjusted budget, and this low rate of spending is also due to vacancies, but also there was slow progress on the electrical upgrade at Phase 1A. And then the entity also experienced delays in the financial close of the Nyanza Light Metals project, and the negotiations to acquire the Isizinda cast house are still underway. MKR spent 43.8% of the adjusted budget, largely due to non-payment for student bursaries. These student bursaries are processed in line with the academic cycle, so there should be an increase from January on. And then also there were delays in the establishment of the Ariguala Techno Hub and establishment of the Maritime University, and as well as the activities in relation to the maritime strategy and events, which is scheduled for the second half of the year. Amafa spent 47.5%. They made some savings on outsourced security services, and their educational programs started late, and that will be set for the second half of the year. Zulu Royal Household Trust, they spent high. So the next three entities partially offset the slow rate of spending, and that was 64.3% of the adjusted budget. That is largely ascribed to the bulk of the audit fees being processed in the first half of the year, and there were also legal fees for the royal family, which were not budgeted for. The Farm Commission spent 51% of the adjusted budget, and that's largely due to the ongoing farm production and development projects. Growth Fund spent 59.6% of the adjusted budget of 80 million. And sorry, just need to move my thing. Largely relating to the acting allowances that's paid to staff, property payments, and professional fees for turnaround strategy, which occurred in the first half of the year. The operating payments, including travel subsistence, marketing, and advertising costs, were also processed in the first half of the year. Projected year-end expenditure, if we look at the bottom line there, there's an under expenditure, 152 million. And that is largely, if we look here, because of Itala Development Finance Corporation, and I'll explain that just now. There's also Ezemvelo, and that is then projecting an over, plus the Zulu Royal, that then offsets that. Richards Bay, also because of capital developments here that hasn't yet been finalized, and the ongoing negotiations, the 10 million there. And then the Gaming and Betting Board, that's because of GROP, their gambling regulators online portal, and also they put money aside from their fees every year to pay for their rental accommodation, office rental. So that is the projected underspending that we see there. We'll go into the detail now. So as I said, the IDFC projects to underspend 150 million. This is largely ascribed to rates, utilities, and insurance cost, which was lower than budgeted for. In addition, IT costs, audit and legal fees, as well as marketing costs, are projected to be lower than anticipated based on the current trend. The big spending there underspending is there because of the refurbishment and the investment properties and the branches under Itala Stock Limited, and that will be rolled over more than 1 year, whereas the budget was provided for in 23-24. KZN GBB, the projected overspending there relates to funds that the entity projects to retain in its reserves at year end, and that's towards the multi-year projects such as the development of the GROP, as well as for office accommodation. Richards Bay projects underspending of 10 million, and that's largely ascribed to ongoing electrical upgrades, and they experience delays on that to get construction workers permit applications. Moses Kutane projects underspending of 1.5 million, and that's due to the entity over budgeting for research and development projects, research and development bursaries for students that do their master's and doctoral degrees. Then the projected underspending is partially offset by projected overspending. There's the Zulu Royal Household Trust, and there's the royal family's legal fees, which are unforeseen at the time when the budget was set. So they have requested for additional funding, and those costs will be split between Office of the Premier and the Zulu Royal Household Trust in line with the mandate. Ezemvelo projects to overspend by 14, but remember they're also projected to over-collect by 7. So it's not that bad, but that's largely due to under-budgeted staff costs for contract staff for critical services, such as legal, occupational health and safety, fire management, and IT support. In addition, due to the vacancies, the entity projects to overspend on acting allowances and overtime. The spending on fuel and gas, maintenance and fleet management security were also higher than budgeted for, thus contributing to the projected overspending. We will still have to make a plan with them to fund the balance of the shortfall that they have. They would have to reprioritize within. Hopefully they've got a good December season. Infrastructure is of concern to us. If we look here, of all the major infrastructure spending, only 22.2% was spent of the adjusted budget by mid-year. If we look across the bank, they're all underspending, and that is of concern to Treasury. We'll see there the mid-year spending on infrastructure. The Zulu Royal Household Trust spent 1.7, and that's 35.3% of the adjusted budget. Of this, 905 was spent on the maintenance of the palaces, 818,000 was spent on refurbishment of generators, air conditioners, reconstruction of septic tanks, as well as repairs to building structures. Dubai Trade Port spent only 17.1%, and that's largely ascribed to late receipt of invoices for the maintenance, as well as the construction of medium-sized factories and road rehabilitation projects, which are scheduled for the latter part of the year. The projected underspending of 5,221 at year end relates to less maintenance required than budgeted for. Izimvelo spent 17 million. Of the budget, 67.699 is allocated to maintenance. Slow spending is largely because of the Midyear and Tala maintenance projects, which experienced initial delays in the first half of the year. And in the implementation of projects such as the Tembe and Dumo, the Mpila Camp staff accommodation, the National Department of Tourism roofing and Midyear revamp projects also were slow spending. Richards Bay spent 38.8%, of which 6 million was on the maintenance of facilities. Slow spending is largely due to the late award of the maintenance contracts. And then there's also the ongoing electrical upgrades at Phase 1A. Itala Development Finance Corporation spent only 14.7% of the adjusted budget due to ongoing refurbishment of the investment properties and Itala SOC Limited branches. And that will be undertaken over multiple years, whereas the full budget was allocated in 23-24. It's also a major contributory factor to the projected underspending by year end. Then on rationalisation, I'm just quickly going to go through it. It started in May 2016. The first set of recommendations were adopted in November 2017, but then subsequent, when the investigations were ongoing, further changes to the recommendations were made in March and October of 2019 and again in June 2020. Organised labour has been consulted. In order to implement the recommendations, the parent departments and entities created joint management committees, and these JMCs assessed all the requests for the filling of posts, and then they advised their MEC before the request was submitted to the MEC Finance and Premier for approval. The entities were not permitted to enter into long-term contracts without consulting the JMCs. In ETIA, the rationalisation process is driven and implemented by the accounting authorities of the public entities affected by the process in consultation with GTAC. The process is overseen by the JMC, which is chaired by the head of the department. And then the merger of the agricultural entities under Vote 4 was successfully implemented, except for Ntingweti, which is still under both shareholding with IDFC and DARD. And then a new mandate also needs to be developed for ADA, as ADA is still operating on a trust deed. And their functions have expanded with the rationalisation of other entities' functions into this entity. The heritage unit that was previously under OTP and AMAFA was successfully incorporated into one entity at the end of 21-22. Just the founding mandates were reviewed. That took some time because of the public consultation processes, and the changes had to be incorporated. So at least we saw the light at the end of the tunnel for some of them, and they were tabled in legislature on the 19th of October for the required legislative processes to be undertaken. So that was the Economic Regulatory Authority Bill, and that's merging the boards of liquor and gaming and betting. Then there's the Tourism and Audiovisual Agency Bill, and that is to establish one entity to perform the powers, roles and functions of the Film Commission and Tourism. Then in terms of the Growth Fund Agency Bill, there was a private trust that is mandating the Growth Fund Agency, and we need to get that into a public entity as 3D so that they can function under the PFMA. And then also the Moses Kotane Research Institute Bill. There was a non-profit company established to start with that process, but we need to now convert it to a provincial public entity, and that is what those bills want to establish. There was a delay with the Environmental Biodiversity Protected Areas and Human Interaction Management Bill. There had been some public consultation, and there has to be extra chapters or annexures developed that incorporate comments specifically relating to human-wildlife conflict. So that is where the process is at the moment. They need to incorporate those changes into that bill. There were draft business cases developed by GTEC. They present the strategic assessment of the mandate, what services and governance arrangements there should be, and they also develop policy frameworks looked at different options, and then the corporate forms, service delivery models, governance structures, risk plans, all kinds of things that the new entity would need at a macro level. There were then also incorporation agreements that were signed by the JMCs to make sure that there were cooperation between the entities. There were joint work streams established for functions like finance, legal, and HR. The review of the board composition and investigation into uniform board members' remuneration is still underway. And then there were draft business cases. They were submitted to National Treasury for the merger entities, the KZN Growth Fund and the MKI, to facilitate the listing of these entities. However, we are waiting for the final legislation to be enacted before National Treasury can act and list these entities, but we are waiting for their written feedback that they can tell us if everything is in order with our processes to date. The major implications in 23-24 at mid-year, what we can see is that the entities cannot all fill their posts. There are critical vacancies, and where posts are considered to be a support post, they can only fill these posts on contract basis. There's significant underspending related to capacity challenges, which in turn led to savings in operational costs. Cost savings were not quantified, and the entities' baselines going forward have not yet been reduced as a result of the rationalization. In fact, the entities are projecting funding shortfalls in implementing the mergers and the new mandates, some of which will be once-off costs. Others are not because of the difference in salary structures, so there will be an ongoing cost implication. Minimal savings were redirected within the entities toward areas of spending pressure, such as business support programs directed at SME startups and to support struggling businesses. Some entities experience governance challenges due to the rationalization process. As such, there are many vacant positions on the boards, and the key positions, CEOs and CFOs, are all acting positions. Not all, but a lot of them are, and that creates instability in the entities. So on the significant issues, we didn't raise them specifically like Tanya did per department. Here are the ones that are in general, but at the end of each chapter in the book that we produced in the reports, there are matters for discussion per entity. But in general here, if we look at the straight line benchmark for the first 6 months, the entities showed a slow rate of spending at 40.9%. The significant underspending relates to capacity challenges, which in turn led to savings in operational cost. Some entities showed budget pressures relating to overtime costs and acting allowances, which were not budgeted for. The majority of entities project to accelerate spending over the remainder of the year, but as Treasury, we think this may not be realistic. And that is, you'll see that expressed in the detailed entity chapters of the report. The majority of entities need to undertake extensive reprioritization within their budgets to align the funds to the priority spending programs and also to make provision towards the rationalization cost and the implementation of the mergers where applicable. When you go through the reports, you'll see, for example, some entities, some programs are spending well and other programs show no spending. So the entities would need to reprioritize within their budgets, but it is also becoming late in the day for them to do so. So this is quite urgent because procurement takes some time and we're also going to the December holidays. So we are a bit concerned about that. And then, as I raised on the previous slide, it's the governance challenges, and then also many key positions such as the CEOs and CFOs that were vacant is of concern to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it Lisa?
Yes.
Oh,
Please.
thank you, Lizelle. I think honorable members, here are the reports, and let's appreciate all the reports that were given to members, and I hope members did note. And I think now we have come to that stage where we have the discussion on our item 7. Honorable members, here are the reports. Mine will be 1 on the issue of, I think also we must also appreciate the surrendering of that 100 million, because I'm sure it's also going to do quite a bit. on assisting us with those shortfalls that we have. And on the whole province, where we have a rollover of 589, at least we did get that. But on the 38 million that we are not getting it back, I'm not sure maybe the reasons or the funds were not committed. And then also on
Hello.
oh, am I not audible? Yes.
Nosihlalo besicela ungabe umagaya idlele. Mhlawumbe usinothe kuqala bese wena ugcina usuvala sihlalo.
Lungile Makeba, ngiyakuzwa. I think the hands that we have received is Honorable Rogers, Honorable Makeba, and Honorable Gavenda. Can we then take those hands as Honorable Rogers, Honorable Makeba, and Honorable Gavenda?
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, colleagues, and thanks to Treasury for the presentation. I must say at the outset, the situation looks worse than what I had originally projected. If you look at the overall projected expenditure of the province, it's quite alarming, and one wonders. Look, I understand the wage agreement, the unfunded portion of the wage agreement would be a contributing factor, but it's in fact not the only factor that's affecting our budget. So some of my direct questions to Tanya would be, if I look at the provincial expenditure and I look at the actual midterm, we're sitting at 70, just short of 76 billion. What really concerns me is that by the end of the year, the projected expenditure would be 156 billion. Now, obviously, the 3.7 billion is going to come off the total projected over expenditure, but it almost appears as though we are almost doubling our expenditure in the second part of the financial term, and I want to get some understanding as to why that is. You know, if we've spent 75 billion in the first 2 quarters, why are we now projecting, as I say, almost double that expenditure in the second 2 quarters? So some of the other questions that I'd like to raise, Chair, is under Midyear, provincial own revenue, we've got the 119 million, which is now being allocated as own revenue or as provincial revenue. Surely that's not provincial revenue, it's money that's unspent in that Dube Trade Port contract. And therefore, I fail to understand why it's own revenue. Perhaps I can get some clarity on that. When it comes to the second part of the financial year and cash blocking, as was raised in Tanya's report, it's going to create serious issues for us. So already I see under education there's problem with paying service providers. There's already rumors circulating that health is not paying some of its service providers, and it's having a detrimental effect on service delivery in the health department. So whilst I understand cash blocking, we've also got to be very careful that we don't jeopardize critical service delivery such as health. And I just wonder how Treasury is going to manage that going forward. Chair, the other question is around the issues of health and education when it comes to compensation of employees. Now, we all know that health and education took upon additional posts. Can Tanya or Treasury give me an idea of what the current expenditure on both health and education is as a percentage of the overall budget? That's the one question. The second question, I was of the impression or the opinion, correct me if I'm wrong, that there was a moratorium on posts purely because of our economic situation. So how did it come about that both health and education proceeded to increase those posts and fill those posts? Was there any process followed there? And then my last question, Chair, is on the Izinduna back pay. I sort of get a contradicting view. In one of the first slides, Tanya referred to the Izinduna back pay being a challenge and a pressure, spending pressure on COGTA. And then in a latter stage, it almost appears as though it's balancing out. I was of the opinion that that back pay was being funded by National Treasury. So perhaps just a bit of clarity around that issue. Those are my questions at this stage. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks, Honourable Rogers. Honourable Zulu.
No, thanks, Chair. One will welcome the report from the Treasury. I think they are giving us a clear scope of what is happening within our province. No, Chair, mine will appreciate Treasury with the work that they've done, especially to education and health. When you look to their budget spending, I think they were able to monitor exactly and to assist the Department of Health so that they can really be able to do and perform their task as departments. My question, it relates to the post by Department of Education. I know that there are a lot of vacant posts, but I can see that there is a positive work that has been done by Department of Education, moving from where they were in terms of filling those educational posts and education specialist posts. Now, my question is there any funds that can be, that the department will be assisted in ensuring that they fill all the vacant posts so that they perform very well, and also the Department of Health? And then the question that relates to the entities. When I look to the which entity, I think it's ADA. It's ADA. I can see that they are performing very well, although their projections, they are all over. It was more than 10 million. I'm not sure whether they've committed that 10 million and they are able to spend in this mid-year budget. They've already been able to spend that budget, that 10 million, which was a rollover. I think these were my concern. Only two questions, Chair. Nothing much. Thanks.
Honourable Zulu. Can we then move to Honourable Kavenda?
Thanks, Chair. Chair, firstly, I think we must just appreciate this presentation. And whilst the scenario presented is not the greatest, as was pointed out by the presenter, this was as at September, and there has been some injection from National Treasury towards the wage bill. So I think the picture may change a bit, and I think once Treasury has worked that through, we'd get a more realistic picture. Because right now this was as at September prior to the injection of additional funds, and that might help. But certainly, I agree with them that we are going to face a cash crunch, but it may not be as extreme as it appears at this point. Then, Chair, the point that I wanted to raise, right, is that we've been granted these rollovers for conditional grants, the NSNP, Human Settlements Development Grant, etc. But my concern is, particularly around the NSNP, can Treasury tell us, the last year we had this whole disaster of funding, food not getting to schools, etc., because of the change in the way in which the service provision was done. And we were told that, I remember when we met with education, we were told that they had extended the contracts of those service providers that they had taken on post that debacle. Is that situation still obtaining now? And in terms of what Treasury understands, are those contracts in place so that come January, there is food in schools, etc.? So that's the one question. The second question is around the issue of health and the absorption of, what was it, close on to 6,000 COVID-19 staff on a permanent basis. Now, this was, the presenter told us that this was unfunded. My concern here, and I don't know if Treasury can provide some light on this, is going forward, unfunded now, and what carry-through costs? I mean, I don't know where the money is coming from to pay them, but is there also funding now being made available or provision being made for the carry-through costs? Because when you put people onto permanent staff, you're going to have to absorb this. And how does that impact on the health budget? Where would the money come from to carry this? Then with education, I think, the runaway staffing bill is an important matter, but I think we'll raise that with the department. On the issue of public works, right, the municipal property rates, are they going to be able to pay this? Because, it's very embarrassing every time we see newspaper headlines, government owing municipalities and municipalities being underfunded and cash-strapped as a result of that. And then Chairperson, I also wanted to raise the issue in terms of where we were told that the bursaries were unlikely to be approved for rollover, and that the department was going to reprioritize. Is Treasury able to tell us where this reprioritization is coming from so that these bursaries would continue? Or should we just refer that to the department? And then lastly, Chair, I think my concern with the entities, I've noted in several, in fact, in almost all of them, one of the big issues of under expenditure is vacancies, right? So we know that there are 3 bills that are supposed to have been submitted to the legislature on the 19th of October, but the balance of it looks like there is still going to be underspending and vacancies with a ripple effect. So I just wanted to look at how those issues are going to be addressed as well. Of course, we will raise them with the departments. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Honorable Governor. I will also...
Sorry, Chair. One last question. I'm so... Okay, this is like my grey blonde hair. On the issue of Operation Vula, the Department of Economic Development and Tourism, right? I see there are issues around the KZN Growth Fund in terms of the youth empowerment initiative, some other options. But Operation Vula, who is managing that now? And are other funds being dispersed? Thanks.
Thank you, Honorable Governor. Can I also give to Honorable Raspansi? I saw the hand of Honorable Raspansi.
Thank you. Good morning, Honorable Chair. I think my concern is around that under expenditure, and then we always promised, at least on paper, that in the second 2 quarters we're going to spend all the money, or either even overspend. So I think that when I see such a problem occurring, I realize that something is we can't do balancing of books only on paper and planning on paper, because somehow there seems to be other areas that we need to now focus on. So one of them is both on the departments and the entities where we have projects that are not finished or problems with projects. I feel that from all the explanation given, a lot of the delays in projects and in spending, therefore, is because of weak scoping exercises. And scoping of a project is always the initial thing that is done in order to then make a decision whether a project should actually be either abandoned or it should be delayed or it can go on, or maybe you should focus to another project while you sort out the scoping issues of another project. So basically, scoping is a very important area. And I don't know whether our Treasury does focus on the critical skills and staff that are needed for these exercises. For example, do the entities or the departments have those necessary risk managers, project managers, IT officers? And those are those positions that are critical to actually start off a project properly. And we are not saying that you have to give these as permanent jobs. I'm saying that we can think out of the box, and maybe for these projects that are very important to the development of our province, we should do these on a contractual basis and just do these per project, so that we don't overspend then on even on the COEs. So that's my opinion on thinking a little differently about how do we really manage our spending properly in the province. The other is on the IT expenditure. Now, I've always said that we needed a separate IT line item in the budget, and I see that it is happening in some departments, but I think that more has to be done in terms of monitoring those, because even IT, if departments can have proper IT programs, then I feel that our own revenue generation can increase. And these are the things that even I think the cabinet needs to ensure that they get right if we need to actually get this expenditure and income, regularized and more predictable in our province. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Rashbansi. I will just add on to what the honorable members have just submitted. On the issue of education, on the issue of staff debt, the old and the current, is there a plan? Has the department provided any plans to recover current debt, even the old debt, if maybe there will be write-offs? Also, on the issue of the ECDs, where it seems to be quite a lot of challenges that are facing the department in that. Also, I'm not sure where I saw on your report where it talks about it, that education seems to have a system, an IT system, where they talk about it's going to be easy for them to able to identify those that owes and then put in place how to recover those monies. I think I saw somewhere, but maybe if you can just assist me on that one, though some of the questions here will have to be given to the department as well. The last time also I've checked with Department of Works on the issue of delays on their projects. It's that they seem to be insourcing some staff to reduce the issue of using consultants as well. If maybe you can also assist me on that one. And then also on social development. On the issue of travel claims versus the state vehicles, using their private cars, are we savings, or is there any saving that we get on that? I also understand that the issue of hijacking and the risk that the staff seems to be going through, but are we making any savings on that? Also, we must also highlight the issue of safety while we're looking at that as well. On the Premier's office, on the issue of spending on the broadband, it's quite a worrying factor on that. I'm not sure if is there any plan that have maybe produced to say what is that they can do to able to spend onto the broadband. Also on the youth fund being moved to, I think it's a new service provider, if that's what we have said, that used to be with growth fund. But my question there will be, do they have enough time, adequate enough to able to spend the money onto this youth fund? I think it's just those, and also on transport. On transport, the transfers to quite a significant amount that has been transferred to Sandra. Is there any monitoring tool from transport to see that those monies are being spent on time by Sandra? I think mine will be, without repeating what the honourable members have submitted, but also onto the community safety and liaison, that low spending as well on the issue of security for Amakosi. I think also something needs to be done there, and also let's look at their business plan and see if does it make sense or if any assistance that needs to be given onto that one. I think that will be my contribution onto that, and then also appreciating your report from our HOD, Lizelle and Tanya. I'm not sure who's going to take us through onto all those questions of clarities by honourable members. Thank you. Back to you, HOD.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and to the members of the committee for the detailed questions. Chairperson, as most of the members have indicated, a lot of these responses will obviously get a more detailed response from the departments themselves, but we will attempt to give some responses to these issues, and then if I've left anything out, my team will also assist me. So in terms of the conditional grants that we have to pay back, in those instances where there is no commitments being made, no way of demonstrating that those funds are committed, we then need to surrender that money back at a national level. That's typically what happens with the conditional grants. In terms of our overall projected year-end expenditure, as Honourable Rogers has indicated, we are projecting just over 9 billion rand, and we're receiving 3.7 from national. Even when we do the adjustments at the end of this month, we will still be projecting quite a substantial shortfall of about 5 billion rand in the province. And this is where the accounting officers have been asked to go back and look at their budgets and identify areas, projects that they need to stop, areas where they need to cut, for us to avoid a situation of simply just having higher accruals in the next financial year. We actually on par in terms of the spending. If you look at the projections, we're sitting just over 50%. So if you look at what we're spending in the second last 2 quarters, it's 79 billion rand, which is quite close to what we've spent in the first half. So they're quite equaled out. In terms of ETIA, the 119 million rand, you are correct. It's not new revenue. So this is the process that we need to follow in terms of the PFMA. Any funds that are returned by public entities or departments have to be deposited into the revenue fund for them to be reappropriated, and they are, just from an accounting treatment, need to be reflected as revenue. But you are correct, it's not actual revenue earned through any activities except for that fund being paid back. Cash blocking, while we do understand the concerns and the impact it has on the service providers, if we hadn't done this, I think we would be in a very, very precarious situation. We will continue to manage the cash flow in terms of what is available versus what departments are loading in terms of payments. The team there do engage on a daily basis with CFOs and with departments. And so, as we indicated, we have asked the accounting officers to indicate to us what they're going to do going forward to prevent a situation of overspending. The only area that we cannot control is the COE, because as you would know, salaries do need to run through and we can't stop those. In terms of the representation, DOE, in terms of their budget, 81% of the budget is for compensation, but the actual projections are sitting at about 82%. That's obviously, we know education is hugely labor intensive. Department of Health, they had budgeted 62% of their budget for COE, but in actual terms, in terms of the wage agreement, it's now sitting at 67% of the original budget. In terms of the additional posts, yes, there is a moratorium, but there was an exemption given, and my team will just clarify exactly who was given those exemptions. And so we were not involved or party to those additional appointments that were made, and they will have long-term effects, as was rightfully said by Honourable Governor. Once you've made an appointment, it does have an impact throughout the MTF, and the department again would have to indicate how they're going to manage that process. In terms of this Nduna, it's two different matters that we're dealing with. One is obviously the back pay of the last few years, and there we indicated that there's really good progress being made, with the only real challenges being those in Nduna that have passed away and haven't necessarily had wills in place and are now having to deal with the Master's Office. The second issue is then the actual increases in the current year, and that's where there possibly are spending pressures, but the department has indicated that they will be able to accommodate those costs through reprioritization. We did, through several engagements with National Treasury and the national departments, engage on assistance, particularly for the wage bill, and that did result in the 3.7 billion rand being given for Department of Health and Education. It is a reflection of about 78% of what they needed, but there will be no further funding coming from national government. The national position, as the Minister presented, is very dire, with tax revenues declining, and the increase in servicing debt has gone up in terms of global interest rates and the devaluation of the rand. So all of that, including the wage bill, has put pressure on the fiscus, and therefore the needs for the cuts, which will be presented during the adjustment budgets. Then, in terms of the NSNP, our understanding is that the contracts that were extended to the SMMEs is still in place. It's a 3-year contract, or the earlier of the appointment of a new company. We have raised certain concerns in that respect. I think the Auditor General has also had findings with regards to the NSNP, but there are contracts in place, so there should not be an impact on the service providers. They're also funded through the conditional grants, and so they won't be affected by the cash shortfall that the department is currently facing. Then in terms of public works, an allocation to them, it's not the full amount that they require for property rates. However, certain municipalities, they will give 50% discount if we pay the full amount. And there are other municipalities that are also offering similar discounts. So we're quite confident that they should be able to cover the full amounts, because we do understand the impact that it has on service delivery across the province. The vacancies in the public entities, yes, it is affected by the rationalisation, but typically what the two entities that are merging will do, they will engage and they will ensure that there's no duplication. So, for example, if you look at two departments, two entities that are merging, they would say, well, we've got a permanent CFO, you have a vacancy, don't fill your CFO on a permanent basis, fill it on a contract basis. So they have been managing that way over the last few years, but we are hopeful that the 1st of April is the go-live date, if the legislation can be processed in time. That will also assist with certainty in that regard. With regards to Operation Vula, my understanding, but my team will correct me if I'm wrong, it's being managed by Etia. Itala did play a role previously, but I'm not very familiar with the details of that. Then I agree with Honourable Rajbansi that there is definitely a weak scoping of projects, both from an infrastructure point of view in terms of specifications, and there are ongoing variation orders that are being issued. Also, just not being doing proper geotechnical assessments on the ground, which inform the specifications, leading to substantial changes in design costs. So there is a challenge around that, and I think that in terms of us providing critical skills, obviously our focus is really about building capacity more in the financial management realm, where we do assist departments, as we did in the past, to set up their risk management units, and we guide them in terms of what they need to have. But at the end of the day, the departments are the one that make those appointments. I would also invite Nelly just to talk a little bit about what our infrastructure team are doing in terms of, they have been over the last few years building the capacity within departments, particularly around infrastructure, right from planning right through to conclusion. And I think this has, the outcome is really reflected when you look at KZN being probably one of the top spenders when it comes to infrastructure and the conditional grants on infrastructure, because of the support that we continue to provide to the departments. Our understanding of the issue around IT really falls with the Office of the Premier, where they are coordinating the digital strategy for the province. And obviously this is to ensure that there's alignment and coordination. It's I think it might be an interesting discussion to have with the Office of the Premier. In terms of the Department of Education staff debt, our understanding is that there is a renewed efforts to improve. The biggest challenge with this is the notification of staff resigning at a school, that information feeding through to the necessary levels of authority to ensure that if there are any debts, it can be recovered. And that is what the department has indicated they're improving the system on, but I'm sure my team can add onto those issues. We also agree with the chair with regards to DSD. We had asked the same question in terms of, if you are no longer using state vehicles because of the increased risk of hijacking, particularly around close to the border of Mozambique, we should see savings. We have not seen that coming through in the numbers that have been presented to us, but bearing in mind that DSD has had spending pressures for a number of years. We agree that we also have raised the same concerns around the Office of Premier with some of the slow spending. We haven't had sight of the plans, and we also have not had sight of how the youth fund will be managed going forward. As we indicated in terms of Department of Transport, we had asked for a report because it's also IDT as well as Sunroll, where quite sizable numbers were transferred in the last 2 years. Our understanding from the agreements that we had seen, DOT do have a monitoring system in place. They need to sign off before at various stages of the project. In terms of comm safety security for Amakosi, our understanding again in our engagement with them is obviously there first needed to be the risk assessment that needed to be done, which caused delays, and there have been some appointments, but they were also then asked to incorporate this into the broader crime fighting business plan, which I would also encourage the members to request sight of and to also provide the oversight in that respect. Chair, if you'll allow me then to hand to my team, I think there's some items I have skipped. Thanks.
Yes, you can. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I'll jump in after my HOD. She's covered quite a lot of the questions already, so mine is ready to just to add a little bit here and there. Just on Honourable Rogers, just in terms of the spending, I think the HOD had covered that it's that in the second half of the year, it's not a doubling necessarily of the expenditure. So we've brought in the projections in the presentation. You'll see third quarter and fourth quarter projections, 38 billion in the one and 41 billion in the other. So that's what they're projecting to spend. Of course, you can't always do an exact doubling anyway of what you've spent by half year. For example, property rates, Department of Public Works has paid the bulk of that in July already. So it's sometimes the first half of the year looks a bit heavier. I know some of the departments transfer the entity transfers quite early in the year as well. So it's not an exact doubling, and you can see the projections are brought into that table on slide 8. So that's how they were projecting to spend, but obviously those projections are showing projected overspending. So there definitely is work that needs to be done to bring our spending back in line with what we'll call the adjusted budget. So that's after the adjustments estimate has been finalised. Then I think the only other thing I'm going to raise is just on the staff debts in the Department of Education. It is exactly what the HED was saying, that there's often a gap between when somebody resigns at a school and when the district office hears about that and captures it on the system. But if you look in the Green Book, you will see that education had planned and still plans to over the next year or two to bring in an electronic e-submission system. So that is specifically because they could see that this is an ongoing problem that's not going to be fixed just by employing debt collection agencies after the fact. What you're trying to do is to stop the problem from occurring. So they are planning on putting together an e-submission system that also includes e-leave so that everything is captured electronically and makes things a lot more efficient. But obviously a system doesn't get built in a day. So the project, I think, is starting in the current year, runs over 2 years, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, I think they're taking the right steps. In the interim, of course, we try and just see that they manage their staff debt collections as best as possible. We built in an incentive for them once to say that whatever you collect, we'll allocate back to you. We haven't seen too much success from that, though. Yeah, I think that's all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I saw Lisa.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes,
Just two specific questions that were asked on the entities. I think Honourable Zulu asked about ADA. So ADA spending on the funds that were rolled over was positive at 54%. So everything that was committed by the year end was well on their way to be spent. The two projects where funds were rolled over that has not been spent by ADA at mid-year related to the Ntingwe tea sales. So although we allowed ADA to receive the rollover, that is tea money that really belongs to the shareholders of Ntingwe Tea, which is DARD and ADA jointly, or the new Ntingwe board. So it was basically to be held on to ADA until the Ntingwe board gives them permission to keep it. And that's why it had not been spent. And then there were two COCTA projects in terms of which ADA collected management fees, and COCTA only signed on those projects in September. So before that was not approved, ADA could not spend it, but we are positive that they will spend that. In terms of Operation Vula, there are still money with the IDFC. It's a small amount. It's about 10 million that was granted in prior years. It's all committed. By mid-year, IDFC had spent 2 million of that, and that's for construction SMMEs. It's all committed, but it's contracted to such an extent where once a contractor achieves a particular milestone, only then is he or she allowed to get the next tranche. So it's fully committed, and we are happy that there is movement on Operation Vula under Itala. I'm not sure under ETIA if they had set aside any money for Operation Vula this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. I hope. I saw Honourable Majopa. I saw Tidich Shezi. And then can I firstly give Honourable Majopa first, and then I will move into Usisneli Shezi.
I was covered, Chair. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Can I then give to Usisneli Shezi?
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Good morning to yourself and good morning to all the honourable members that are in the platform. I think Honourable Zulu asked a critical question around whether as a province we have money to assist education and health to fill some of the critical vacancies. I think at the moment as a province, we do not have this kind of money. We would have to then reprioritize from within our baseline. From where we are sitting, National has not indicated that they will give us any additional funding. But this then remains an area of concern because some of the vacancies in those two departments are quite critical and they need to be filled. It's the same issue with the absorption of the COVID-19 staff in health. Whilst they do not have the funding for that, but some of those staff are filling critical vacancies. So it is a question as to how we then reprioritize from within the baseline to fill those particular vacancies. I think that, Honorable Governor, there was a question, I think we've missed it on the bursaries. I'm not too sure which department was supposed to reprioritize for bursaries, but I think we have not answered that question. If you can just get clarity as to which department was that one. On the issue of the project scoping and the technical skills, yes, it is an ongoing process that as Treasury, we have a small infrastructure unit. We are trying to capacitate the departments in terms of improving their technical skills in terms of the built environment, but we also are working with a Department of Public Works, who are then the custodians of rolling out the infrastructure projects for the provincial government. For our little contribution also this year, we do have quite a number of interns that we are training to do the condition assessments and to produce infrastructure maintenance plans. And we are hoping that the interns that we are training will then add to the pool of the skills that are available to the public sector, so that we are able to do the assessments and also the estimates in terms of how we roll out our maintenance plan. I think the other question on the ECD, also I could not fully understand the question, but in terms of the ECD grant itself, which is now with Department of Education, that grant has been cut from national. We are still engaging with national because we are indicating the dire need on the ground for this ECD function. So it's a continuous engagement, because as a province, we want more money for our ECD function. Education are already showing a pressure on the ECD function because this is not adequately funded. I think that on the issue of the public works and the insourcing, yes, there is that project management unit. Whilst it was not fully budgeted for, that's why there's a pressure in public works, but we think that it's the right way to go, that they insource some of these particular skills, because outsourcing is not always the best. Obviously, they cannot insource everything, but public works has begun to build in-house capacity, because them being the custodian of the infrastructure program, they need to have adequate capacity within. The issue of the broadband spending, I would really request that the committee engages with OTP, because the expenditure for the 30 million that was suspended last year is very low. However, I am aware that the Honourable Premier has appointed the IT Council. One then hopes that we will see an improvement in terms of the expenditure on that broadband funding. On the youth fund in the Office of the Premier, as Treasury, we are also concerned that changing the methodology of distributing the youth funds and trying to get a new private partner at this late stage, there might be a delay, and we're not too sure whether we will be efficient in spending this money and then allocating this money to the relevant beneficiaries. But I think that that's one of the issues that we have highlighted in the report as one of the areas that the committee may want to engage OTP on. Those would be the comments that I would like to do. Thank you very much, Chairperson and members of the committee.
Thank you, Sister Lee. I think we've exhausted, because I think we have answered me on the issue of ECT growth. Yes, Honourable Governor.
Ms. Shezi wanted to know which department I was referring to in relation to the bursaries. It's the Office of the Premier.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Ma'am Shezi, are you still there on that question that you have asked on the issue of bursaries?
Thanks, Chairperson. Yes, Office of the Premier are still indicating that they will reprioritize from within to fund those particular bursaries, even though it does seem like there is a delay, especially on their aviation program. So I think it's one of the issues that we have raised in the for discussion, and the Oversight Committee can then engage Office of the Premier on that particular project. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I think, honorable members, we have received all the answers that we have posed to our official president on with the SOD. And I think we have come to the end of this report, appreciating the engagements that have been done by honorable members and our officials. Once again, let me thank you, honorable members. And then on our next presentation will be on number 8. We'll only allow finance committee members only into the support. We can release other members. It must only just be the finance committee members. Honorable members, do we want to take a 5-minute tea break or we want to proceed? Can I hear from honorable members?
Can we take a break, Chair?
Okay, and 5 minutes?
That's fine.
Thank you. So let's take a 5-minute break, honorable members, and then we'll be back in, say, maybe 25 past 11. Thank you. Honorable members, I'm sure we're all back now. Honorable members, are we back?
We back. We back.
Thank you. Without a further ado, we are now going to get a presentation on 2023-2024 second quarter financial and non-financial performance reports for Vote 6 Treasury. Also, I believe that we have received the reports a couple of days ago with all members. I hope that all members have received the reports, and I also hope that members did go through the reports, so that maybe we'll allow Treasury to summarize the report, or if not, honorable members, if we did not, then Treasury will just take us through the full report. I think honorable members will guide me on that one. Honorable members. Honorable members in the Saswagan. Engathi TLB ngaphezu kwetiye.
Chair, it sounds good to me.
Thank you. Other honorable members, are they all back? Honorable Governor, let me just do a roll call.
I'm here.
Thank you. Honorable Majopa.
Present. Present.
Thank you. Honorable Respansi. Honorable Makeba. Honorable Rogers. Honourable members, what do we do? Do we proceed or we wait for members to join? I don't know what do we do, Mhlambe. What do we do?
Are we not correcting, Chair?
We
If
do
we are
have a
correct,
quorum because remember we are continuing with the.
It corrects once. I think we can continue because we are all engaged in some other work.
Okay, all right. That's fine then. And honourable members, can you then please assist me on my first statement where we all received the reports. Now, I wanted just to check if can we then be given a summarized report or we want us just for them just to go through if we have not read the reports. I just need your guidance on that one. Then I will allow the departments to give us a report. Okay. Then can I then give Treasury to give us a report, presentation? HOD.
Thank you very much, Chair. We will definitely give a high-level summary of the presentations based on your request. As we sit at the end of the year, mid-year, we'd spent 45% of our budget, and we had achieved 90% of the performance indicators for Q2. But we also give us an assessment of how we are achieving year-to-date, just to give the committee members that sense. We obviously have had a number of spending pressures as well, and we've had to reprioritize. You will see there will be slides on some of those spending pressures, but in the main, it was our contribution to fighting crime. We also then identified funding for the provincial precinct for the transaction advisors of 5 million rand. And then there were additional community outreach programs and communication budget pressures that you will see the CFO will talk to. How we were able to mitigate the spending pressures was to look at the vacant posts that we had. We were to reprioritize which posts we were going to be filling and which posts we would need to put on hold until there was certainty on next year's budget numbers. We have, on the positive side, also submitted a report on the filling of vacancies. We've decreased our vacancy rate from 19% to 16%. We finalised over 141 posts, but as members would be aware, we always have resignations during the year, so we've already had 34 resignations. We had 36 promotions, and both of these create further vacancies. We've also recently received DPSA's concurrent approval of our new structure for internal audit. Members will recall we indicated that we want to move away from reliance on consultants and build our own internal capacity. And so that looks at an additional 81 posts. So the funding is there. The funding was obviously under consulting fees, which will now become compensation of employees. Chair, I will then ask the CFO, Tabani Ndlovu, to take us through the financial report, followed by Ade Zwane, who will then take us through the performance information. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, HOD.
Good morning, Honourable Chair and the members of the committee, my HOD and colleagues. I will present the high-level summary of the report as flighted before the members for Vote 6 Treasury as a department for the period of the first 6 months, which is ending at the end of September. Going to the first slide, Chair, it is reflecting the budget versus expenditure for the period of 6 months. You'll see it is presented in terms of the programs from program 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The department has 5 programs as they are named on the screen, all the members can see. And corresponding to each program, you will see it's the budget, then the second column expenditure, then the projections for the quarter. For the quarter ending in September, then the projected over or under column, then the percentage spent and the comparative information from previous financial year. Starting with administration, as the HOD has indicated that we had some expenditure pressures. You'll see that program 1 was projecting to be over, I said, at the end of the year by 18 million rand. Mainly it is coming from wage agreements increase that were not budgeted for, also from goods and services. various items, adverts, contractors, computer services, venues and facilities, and crime prevention initiative, which was a SOPA pronouncement by Honorable Premier. So overall, most of this was not budgeted for under Program 1. As a result, we're showing the pressure of 18.7 million rand. But in terms of the expenditures, you see that department or the program was at 49.6% in terms of the expenditure against the budget. Going to Program 2, Sustainable Resource, it was projecting to be under by 3.1 as at the end of September. Mainly here, it was after considering the SOPA pronouncement as well of it's not SOPA pronouncement, I mean the feasibility study, where we'll be updating the report for feasibility study, the PPP for government precinct. That money will be transferred to the Department of Public Works. Other than that, this program was showing that it will be under by 3.1 million rand. That amount will be transferred during adjustment estimate to Program 1, which is showing a pressure. Then going to the third program, financial governance, it was showing a projection. It was projecting under by 8.6 million rand. Mainly, it is coming from vacancies. We will see that it is indicated there under comments column of about 7.5 coming from unfilled post that the department is currently busy filling, and goods and services as well as projecting to be under by 2.2. Only capital expenditure that had a small pressure of 1.1. Looking at the net figure of 8.6, that will also be moved to Program 1 to offset that pressure of 18.7 million. Program 4, internal audit, was also projecting to be under by 5.6. In the main, it is also coming from compensation of employees after offsetting a small over projection of 1 million rand from goods and services, as well as a small over projection of 22,000 rand coming from transfers and subsidies to mainly to the item household for staff exit cost, as well as payment for capital assets for the rollover commitments that came from the previous financial year that we were not that we will not get what you call the rollover from budget office 4. So the admin had to make an internal reprioritization to make sure that we are able to cater for those rollover commitments. If we go to Program 5, Municipal Finance, we'll see that it was at 47% with the expenditure projecting to spend less by 2.7 million. The reasons are given there. In the main, the 2.7 million figure is a net between goods, between compensation of employees saving and over projection on goods and services, as well as capital expenditure. Then it netted with 2.7, which will also be added up to make a provision for that 18.7 million under Program 1 that is showing a pressure on. Chair, if we looked at department overall, the budget that was allocated in the main allocation was 678 million, and the expenditure at the end of the first half of the financial year was 303 million. Projecting to spend furthermore towards the end of the year 373, and we anticipating to remain with only 1.4 million of the that will be an underspending. It's a small percentage, but we will be monitoring the budget and any other pressures that are coming up towards the end of the financial year or in the next remaining 6 months. But however, this was a picture I said the end of September. We will note that October has gone past and we are in the middle of November. The picture I said today has since changed. But in the next engagement of the committee with the department, we will then provide the updated situation. So here we are mainly reporting on the historical information. taking into effect, then we pay every day, and things are moving in the department. Then if you go to the next slide, we're showing economic by economic classifications. Economic classifications, we'll start by compensation of employees line item. It's a first line item there. You'll see that at the end of September, it was at 43.3%, and projecting to be under by 25 million rand because of the vacancies that the department is currently busy filling. Then if we move to the next major line item for goods and services, it was at 46%. However, the projections there, we were projecting to be over by 20 million rand. Hence, you'll see that the 20 million rand will be offset by saving from compensation of employees. Then the next item, interest and rent on land, there is no expenditure against it, because so far as my colleagues presented earlier on, that the department is cash, the province is cash positive currently. As a result, we do not pay any interest expenditure. So we only use that item for interest and rent on land, mainly when we are on bank overdraft on the overall cash position of the province. So far, things are good. So it's a good understanding. Then if we move to the next category of the economic classification is transfers and subsidies, you will see that it is showing pressure of about 734, and it will be offset by savings coming from compensation of employees. Then the next one will be capital assets. We had most of the orders that were coming from the previous financial year that were issued to service providers, the department buying different items under capital expenditure, of which it was indicated that we won't get the rollovers for those. Hence, the department will have to do the internal reprioritization, and we will pay that from the savings that will come from compensation. Mainly, this will be reflected, Chairperson, when the adjustments that relate to vote 6 are presented to the House at Legislature. Then all these changes will be indicated there to say these are the movements that will be done by the department, trying to reallocate or to do the environments to cater for all the pressures that were not anticipated at the beginning of the financial year. But what I can assure the committee right now is that the department is busy filling all those posts that are there to make sure that come next financial year, we do not have underspending on compensation. I heard on the previous session when the discussion raised that what is the department doing to fill the vacancies. So Treasury as well, I can assure the committee that she is working hard to make sure that all those vacancies are filled, and that underspending won't happen in the next financial year. Chairperson, I think I will stop here, as indicated that we must just share the high-level summary of the expenditure versus the budget. Unless there are questions, Chairperson, then I'll be able to go back and address those questions. But in the main, this was a position of the department and the budget performance as at the end of the first half of the financial year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kajeni. I think Undlovu, if I'm not wrong, yes. Thank you, Kajeni. I think, honorable members, here is the report. Do you want to engage, or must we just...
I'm not sure if I lost you.
Yeah, what I'm saying is, here is the report that has been presented by CFO. And if we want to engage now, or we just go through the full report and then after engage when all the reports have been given.
I think we should go through all the reports that are going to be presented, Chair.
Yeah. Kajen, can we then just go through all the reports and then after we'll engage when all the reports have been presented? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. What was for me is just to present the first two slides, which shows the high level of the department. The next report that will come will be from my colleagues from M&E Monitoring and Evaluation, where they will present the APP targets and the achievements of the department. But from the financial point of view, this was just a high-level summary of what was the department performance for the first 2 quarters of the financial year. Thank you. Thembi Mkuchula or Mrs. Aida Zwane, the Chief Director of Corporate Services, will take the committee through the APP performance report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Chairperson, good morning to you. It's still in the morning. And good morning to all the honorable members of the committee. Good morning to my HOD, as well as management from Treasury, as well as colleagues. Chairperson, my name is Utembi, and I'm going to be taking the committee through the performance information for Q2. CFO has presented the financial information, which is funding what the department plans to do, which is what I'm going to be presenting to you now, Chair. And in terms of the quarter, okay, Chairperson, just for noting, Treasury only has 5 programs and we are still maintaining them, and this is what I'm going to be reporting on for the quarter under review. In terms of the indicators as we have them, Chairperson, as per our approved and tabled APP, we have implemented 31 performance indicators, which has targets in them. And Chair, we're going to reflect on the indicators where our target was fully achieved, which in this case we had 28. And we then had only 3 indicators, Chair, for this quarter that were not fully achieved. I must indicate, Chair, to you and the committee that when we have indicators that we say they are not fully achieved, we are trying to reflect to say that something was done, but we could not meet all our targets. Say, for instance, Chair, if we had planned to do 2 trainings and unfortunately we managed to do 1 because of some certain circumstances, we will then reflect that indicator as not being fully achieved. So it would not be then recorded as an indicator that was fully achieved. So we only had 3 indicators in that regard, Chair, where we only had where we had targets that could not be fully achieved. This is the picture that we are showing to the committee, Chair, this morning. We are reflecting to you, Chair, what we have as our planned annual indicators and targets for the year, and what we have achieved to date, which is where we are, including our reported performance for Q1 as well as Q2. So we can you can be at ease, Chair, in terms of seeing where the department is and if there is an indication as to whether the department will be able to achieve the annual target come the end of the financial year. As well as, Chair, reflecting on what our planned indicators were for the quarter, which in this case we had planned 31, and we then only achieved 28, which is then, Chair, giving us a percentage of 90% achievement in terms of the implementation of our indicators and targets as we have them on the APP. Chair, you have indicated that we must reflect a very high-level report. So I will not be talking to Program 2 and I will not be talking to Program 5 because, Chair, those programs have achieved the 100%, which means everything that was planned for the quarter was fully achieved. So I would only reflect, Chair, on where we had indicators where our targets could not be achieved and just reflect on the reasons why we could not fully achieve those indicators. I'm going to start with Program 1, Chair. We only had 1 indicator, Chair, where our target could not be met, and that target is relating to our payment of invoices, Chair, within the 30 days. And, Chair, unfortunately, there was an invoice that was sitting with the responsibility manager, and then unfortunately it could not be included to be paid within the 30 days. However, there was then a consequence management that then also followed in that regard. So, Chair, we were sitting at 98 0.8%, which you can equate it to a 100%. But because we still have to reflect, if we had any invoice that was not paid, then we still reflect. But technically, Chairperson, we are sitting, our percentage is quite a good percentage. Then I'm moving on to the next program, Chair, which is program 3, where we are reflecting our achievement that was not fully achieved as we had planned. And Chairperson, this is coming from our supply chain management, where we had planned to implement 4 indicators and only 3 indicators could be achieved, Chairperson. And this is now coming from the review of our policies in line with our SCM legislation, sorry. So, Chairperson, in terms of what the unit has planned, we had planned to do 4, but unfortunately, of what was planned, we could only do 2 because we have a lack of the warm bodies in this unit due to resignations that are happening. However, Chair, as part of the corrective actions, the process of filling those vacant posts are underway. I won't go to program on. We're going to move to program 4, Chairperson. This is where our last achievement comes from. And this, Chair, is coming from our follow-up audits. We had planned to do 12 and we could only do 6. Chair, this was mainly because we had to prioritize doing the audits for the school nutrition program. Hence, you see on the first indicator, it was a little bit more than what was planned because we then had to put priority because it take priority that the audits for the school nutrition program be done as soon as possible. So we could then not do the 12 that we had planned, Chair, but we only managed to do 6. However, Chair, by the look of things, we are going to be able to achieve the rest of the targets come the year end. Chairperson, this is our high level. I said I won't go to program 5 because we have a 100% achievement. Thank you, Chair. This is the performance information for the department for quarter 2.
Thank you, Tembi. Anyone else going to present our next item? Are we done? Okay. Thank you, honourable members. Here are the reports. Seems to be straightforward, and the reasoning behind the not achieving of 100% were given. Honourable members, here is the report. Can we then engage or any point of clarities? Honourable Governor.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, the only issue, and I think that we must commend Treasury on their performance, one of the things that the AG says is that your budget expenditure must match your service delivery. So I think that's important. But having said that, I do want to raise this issue, which we have been raising with Treasury for the past few years, which is the issue of the filling of vacant posts. Now, I see that in 4 of the programs 2, 3, 4, and 5, there are vacancies that have not been filled, and we are told that they take 4 to 6 months to be sorted out. And in that period, they have been budgeted for. The funds have not been spent. And the under expenditure in relation to the filling of vacant posts seems to be in the region of 25 million, which is a fair amount of money. And the department is saying that they will use it on other things. So my question is, and I'm looking at what has come up in terms of the recruitment, right? Total vacancies approved to be filled from the first 107. And as at the 6th of September, there were 63 posts to be filled, right? They can tell me whether they've done that and reduced their figure. But also, my concern is that they say they're taking the funds and they're going to use it where there are other pressures. What then happens to these posts? Are they then closed? Will they reopen them in the new financial year? Will they review the organogram, etc.? Thanks, Chair.
And I saw Honorable Teko Rashbansi.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. My first one is about the provincial precinct and the 5 million rand given for the scoping exercise. But this is just to advisors, because I think that this is an ongoing matter, and we've already spent so much of money. So I was trying to think that we were given presentations before of, you know, the plans and what it would look like, etc. So are we like starting from scratch again, or we have, because this money is given to advisors, and I don't know for which stage, because it's still saying it's it's scoping money. The other is the DPSA approval, which I think is great for the internal capacity. But if the intention is to use consultancy fees now to pay permanent employees with critical skills, that's an important move. But I just want to check with the department whether these internal capacity posts are actually the ones that are really critical in the sense of all the problems that we are facing within not only this department, but all other departments, because Treasury oversees everybody else. Because currently we still have a vacancy rate of slightly over 10%. Then the M&E report, I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was really well done. But the one thing that I wanted some clarification on was Program 3, and that's the supply chain management. I know that we are told that one of the indicators from 4 is not achieved. I just wanted to know what was that specific indicator. Thank you.
Honorable Rashbansi. Thank you, honorable members. I think I'm covered on the two issues, on the issue of the vacant post and the issue of precinct. Let me hand it over to our officials, maybe to give clarities on the matters that have been raised by our honorable members.
Thank you, Honourable Chair, and again, I'll invite the DDTs that are present in the meeting to also give input to the questions. In terms of the COE, the underspending that we have in COE, I think if you look at the detailed presentation that we provided, we have been filling positions, we have been filling posts, but at the same time, you then have vacancies arising from resignations or from internal promotions. So we always refer to it as the leaking bucket syndrome. So what we're saying is for the current year, because of the spending pressures, there are one-off spending pressures, we would have to utilize that underspending in COE to offset those spending pressures. Where we feel that it's a permanent cost and there needs to be adjustments during the baseline, the CFO has been busy doing that for the budget submissions for the MTF, including the use of zero-based budgeting methodology to try and correct the baseline in the different business units. And I'm sure that when we get the opportunity to present the committee, we'll be able to present that matter in more detail. In terms of the precinct, absolutely, we are not repeating or starting from scratch. Significant work had been done by transaction advisors previously. It was a consortium of firms. The HOD of Public Works has signed a deviation to ensure that we utilize the same service providers that are on the GTAC panel, as well as the work that Public Works has done in terms of the designs, the detailed designs. So because of that, it was a rough estimate, the costs, but obviously once the team are on the ground and they've been provided with all the work that's been done, it's certainly going to be a fast-track process because of the extent of work that was done previously. We also obviously have involved National Treasury in terms of the previous Treasury approvals that were obtained. And again, they're also indicating that obviously we need to update the figures, but they're definitely would be able to fast track those issues. So we are quite positive around the precinct matter. In terms of DPSA and internal audit, I think maybe I'll ask Madhavi just to talk through this. She's been appointed as the DDG now, no longer acting. But it's certainly, I think, will assist in terms of the quality and the consistency of the quality of the service. But I'll ask her just to talk to that. In terms of the indicator that wasn't met in Programme 3, that was with regards to the review of SCM policies. Members will recall that in February of this year, the new triple PFA regulations came out and all SCM policies were required to be reviewed. And there was a substantial amount of work that was done by that business unit to assist municipalities, departments of public entities to ensure that their policies were in compliance. And so we also anticipate that when the procurement bill is reviewed, we will see and necessitate a further review of SCM policies. But we have had quite a few resignations, and perhaps Tulio Santonu can also talk to that. I think let me pause there, Chair, and just ask the colleagues just to add. Thank you.
SHOD, I'm sure members are covered, unless maybe there is someone else who wants to contribute. Yeah, it looks like we are all covered on the SHOD report. Can we then adopt the report? Honourable members, can I then have a mover and a seconder of the report? Honourable Takur Responsi.
Honourable Chair, I move for the adoption of the reports.
Thank you, Honourable Responsi. Can I have a seconder? Can we have a seconder?
Seconded, Chair. CQ.
Thank you, Honourable Madlopa. So our report has been seconded. Therefore, we have reached the end of our meeting. Once again, thank you to Mrs. Carroll and his staff, officials who were present. Thanks to Ospai here with me, and also thank honourable members for our meeting that seems to have went well. The reports that have been given to us, we were really, I think our meeting has went quite well. Let's appreciate all the work that has been done. Thank you, and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks.